Hi, everybody. Thank you. Welcome, and thank you for joining us today for our second webinar in our 2025 webinar series, which is called Mastering Lewy Body Dementia Together. My name is Keith Fargo. I'm the Director of Scientific Initiatives here at the Lewy Body Dementia Association. This year, we will be exploring a range of topics to help you better understand Lewy body dementia and its symptoms, strengthen your ability to advocate for services and support, and pick up new tools and techniques to live optimally. Next slide, please. And I apologize if you hear my dog barking in the background. LBDA's mission is to optimize the quality of life for those affected by Lewy body dementia. And to do this, we accelerate awareness, advance research for early diagnosis and improved care, and provide comprehensive education and compassionate support. Next slide, please. A few technical items to review before I bring in our presenter. To launch closed captioning at any time, you can select Show Captions at the bottom of your Zoom toolbar. There is also on your Zoom toolbar a resources icon. And you can open that resources icon, which has links as well as downloadable resources to accompany today's session. And if you would like, you can print out the webinar worksheet that's included in that resource guide to help you learn how to apply today's information. We do encourage you to submit questions throughout the presentation using the Q&A icon, which is also on your Zoom toolbar. And following the presentation, we will address a few of those questions, as many as we can get to, from the audience Q&A pool. My colleague Rose will be dropping links into the chat throughout the presentation, and these links will also come to you in your email inbox about 1 week from today as part of the post-webinar thank you email. This presentation is being recorded, and an email will be sent to all of those who registered with the link to view the recording about 1 week from today. And finally, when you leave the session today, a brief survey will appear asking you for your feedback about today's presentation. We would greatly appreciate it if you would take a moment to complete that survey, because that really does help us inform our content for the remainder of the year as well as for future years. Next slide, please. You can keep learning until our next webinar with our on-demand learning options. Recordings of all our past webinars can be found on our YouTube channel, LBDA TV. Next slide. The Lewy Learning Center offers courses on a variety of topics that you can watch, rewatch, and share with friends and family. And I think we're going to drop a link to that as well. And then slide 6, thank you, Rose. You can also watch the film Spark about Robin Williams' battle with Lewy body dementia and other video offerings on our Mediflix channel. And finally, please do join, actually not finally, it's not the last slide, but please do join our social media channels to hear about upcoming webinars and programs. And next slide, of course, please do visit our website at lbda.org for all your other LBDA needs. Now, we are going to learn a little bit more about who is with us today in the audience and what your experience is with Lewy body dementia. Rose is going to launch a polling question now, which hopefully you should see on your screen now. And you please answer that there. All right, looks like we're getting a lot of answers here, up to about 200 folks. Excellent. Looks like it's stabilizing now. I'd say about 60% of the audience today, their experience is less than 3 years or up to 3 years. About 30% of the audience told us 4 to 8 years. And just under 10% of the audience said 9 to 15 years, and then a small percentage, just less than 5%, with more than 15 years. So I'll stop sharing that now. Okay, Rose, did that work okay? Did people see the responses?
Yes, yep, we share that right at the end.
Excellent. Thank you very much. All right. So we've got one more question to ask you through polling today, and here it comes. And this question is to help us know a little bit more about your audience and about your familiarity with the webinar topic today. All right, we've got about 250 people in the with poll responses. I'm going to go ahead and end that poll. Looks like I can share the results here with you. It looks like we've got about a third of the audience here. It's a new topic for you. That's great. You'll learn a lot today. About 2/3 said they know a little bit about the topic, which is excellent to hear. And hopefully you'll learn some additional news items today. About 6% said I'm very knowledgeable about today's webinar topic. Hopefully you can glean a few more nuggets as well. And no one said they consider themselves an expert in today's topic. So I'll stop sharing that now. And thank you very much, you guys, for those responses. That really helps us with these webinars as well. So let's go ahead and meet our presenter now. This is someone you may recognize if you've attended a few of LBDA's community webinars. But Julia Wood is the Director of Professional and Community Education here at LBDA and the capable facilitator of many of our webinars. But in addition to webinar hosting and teaching skills, Julia has her master's degree in occupational therapy and is a licensed registered occupational therapist. She graduated with her master's degree in occupational therapy from the University of Minnesota after completing clinical field work in neurological rehabilitation from the Mayo Clinic at St. Mary's Hospital campus in Rochester, Minnesota. Julia has extensive clinical experience in the interprofessional care of people with Parkinson's disease and related dementias as part of the comprehensive care team at the University of Pennsylvania's Parkinson's Disease and Movement Disorder Center of Excellence for many years. In addition to her work as the Director of Professional and Community Education for the Lewy Body Dementia Association, she also serves as part of the certification and training faculty for the LSVT BIG program. She also serves as faculty for the Parkinson's Foundation team training and served on the Parkinson's Foundation Rehabilitation Task Force in 2021. Julia co-authored the first practice guideline for adults with Parkinson's disease for the American Occupational Therapy Association, AOTA. She also served on the steering committee for the 2022 International Lewy Body Dementia Conference and serves on the Comprehensive Care Subcommittee for the World Parkinson's Congress, WPC. She is also a member of the Board of Directors for the International Neuropalliative Care Society. Please use your reactions tab to help me give a warm welcome to Julia Wood, who is joining us on the other side of the stage today. Welcome, Julia.
Thank you so much, Keith. Thank you for the warm welcome. Oh my gosh, and thank you guys so much for all the reactions. It's so great to see everyone today. I'm really excited to be here and share this topic with you. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and we'll get going. Okay, you guys. So let me get my slideshow. All right, so today's topic, for those of you that are not aware, is seeing the way, enhancing life with Lewy body dementia through visual strategies. And as Keith mentioned, I'm an occupational therapist. And so this is something that was really near and dear to my heart and something I had to work with a lot with families in my clinical practice. So we're going to go ahead and get going. We've got a lot to cover today. Okay. So today, what I hope that you'll take away from this webinar, from this session, is, we're going to talk a lot about ways to optimize your environment because a lot of what we see is the environment that we're in. So we're going to be talking a lot about lighting and color contrast and ways to really think about and look at your space differently when we're supporting those visual difficulties with Lewy. We're also going to talk about some visual aids and, talk about how there's not a one size fits all approach. So you have to get a little bit creative and I'll help you have some ideas hopefully on how to do that as well. And then, not technically really a visual symptom per se, but visual hallucinations do fall within that realm. And we find a lot of people have a lot of questions about these. And so I'll talk about those a little bit toward the end of the presentation. And then also we'll do a little about 15 minutes of Q&A today at the end. So if you have questions, you can drop those in the question and answer box, and we'll take a look at those at the end. All right. So, when we're talking about vision in Lewy body dementia, a lot of times we think about vision from the eye, and I'm going to talk about that. But a lot of our vision happens in the brain, and this is something that we're not usually familiar with, and that a lot of us aren't really aware of. And the thing to remember, I think, too, and this is why this was always such a big topic area for me, is vision impacts everything in your life. If you think about tasks that are more complicated, like driving, everything from negotiating lanes to parking, judging distance, all of that is dependent upon our visual function. But then, even things more mundane, just day to day, getting dressed, telling the color of your clothing, finding the right grooming article. I had a woman one time who came in and she had clearly put her lip liner on her eyes and her eyeliner on her lips. And so we had to work on that. But that's a really easy mistake that, if you're having trouble with your vision, could be easy to make. We're also going to get into how safety and mobility are tied in with vision as well. And then, of course, some of those higher level tasks that we have to do day to day, like preparing meals, doing home repairs, even things like reading, paying bills, can really become very difficult for people with Lewy. And there's a lot of simple things that we can do that can really help support these tasks. All right. So I just want to remind you all, this is not to get into a nomenclature lecture about Lewy body dementia, but we do find sometimes that there's a little confusion. When we're talking about Lewy body dementia, we're talking about our folks in the audience who may have Parkinson's disease and be wondering if they're having some symptoms that are starting to progress a little bit more. Maybe you already have, you've had Parkinson's disease for a while and now you feel like you have disease dementia. We also have folks on the call that have dementia with Lewy body. So those changes to cognition happened first or at the same time of the Parkinsonism. So I'll be speaking to the research and what we understand about vision with both. And sometimes I find that gets you guys a little confused. You'll be like, why are you talking about Parkinson's so much? But the thing to remember is all of these conditions are types of Lewy body disease. They all have Lewy bodies involved. And so we do see a lot of similarities as well. All right. With that, though, I just wanted to point this out again because I think it's really important for us always to remember that there's a lot of differences when we talk about Alzheimer's disease and dementia with Lewy bodies. This is that slide I like to share a lot that shows the cognitive changes, right? So we're talking about that brain function. Notice those blue bars in the graph. Those are visuospatial measures that they did. The top set of bar graphs are people with Alzheimer's dementia. The bottom set of bar graphs on your screen are people with dementia with Lewy bodies. And they did the same measures, but notice the differences. That big black bar on the far left-hand side, that is a dementia rating scale. So that's like a global screening of different aspects of your cognition. You notice how that's the same. And that's where the similarities end. We move to the right, you start to see those red bars for memory, much lower scores, much bigger impairments in Alzheimer's, right, than in Lewy. Move over to those green bars for language. They're absolutely opposite. The one that's stronger and a bigger score for Alzheimer's is lower below for Lewy, and vice versa. Then you notice those yellow bars. We're talking about attention and executive function. We're going to get into that a little bit today because attention really does impact vision. Doesn't matter if you can see something if you're not looking at it and visually attending to it. And then those blue bars are that visuospatial function. And look at how different those scores are. Those bars at the top for people with Alzheimer's, they're usually doing pretty well. Down at the bottom for Lewy, it's really a problem. So this is one of those key differences we're seeing here. All right, you guys. So when we talk about vision and LBD, what we understand is that, Lewy body dementia and the presence of those Lewy bodies in the brain impacts the visual system because it interferes with the ability of the brain to process and respond to that visual information the same way it did before. Visual signs and symptoms occur early in the disease, But a lot of times people aren't aware of them until much later on. We even have a lovely gentleman in our group of volunteers who talks about how he didn't realize he was having a hallucination early on in his Lewy body dementia. He would see mice running when he would walk into his garage. And it wasn't until one day the mice ran toward him that he realized he wasn't really seeing mice, that it was a hallucination. And these can occur very early on and persist throughout the disease as well. So coming from the starting gate, this can be a real issue, but we often don't recognize it. So with that recognition, we've got another polling question here for you that Rose is going to launch. So I'm just curious, as a care partner, as a person with LBD, as a healthcare provider, have you noticed changes to your vision, to your partner's vision, to your patient's vision? Is this something that you hear about? Is it something maybe that you're not sure though? Like, I do have this one thing, but I don't really know if that's my vision or not. And so it looks like we've got almost all of you guys coming in here. Thank you so much. Most of you say yes, absolutely. So we've got 84% over 80% saying, yes, you are noticing some changes. About 6% are saying no. And then that 11% that are not sure, my hope is that at the end of the talk today, that you'll look at this and be like, oh, I do have a better understanding now of what those symptoms are and what they look like. All right, so let's carry on here. So I want to start with changes to vision that we see in Parkinson's. And the reason is there's been a lot more research on this, as you can imagine, because as we talk about, you guys, dementia a lot of times is one of those outliers that they don't want in research. I also did find a really good study on vision and dementia with Lewy bodies, but I think it's important to note both. So you'll notice here with Parkinson's, right? It's a movement disorder. And there's elements of that Parkinsonism with Lewy body dementia. So changes to eye movement are one that we'll see. So being able to track, smooth pursuits when you're reading and following something. Um, Also, dopamine as another thing to be aware that it's part of our color vision. So they might have impaired color perception, the color blindness, but colors seem to get more faded. And then that contrast sensitivity becomes more difficult and more impaired for use. People have trouble with figure ground and also depth perception. These are not just for looks. I've had a lot of problems in my life with my own depth perception being corrected, and I've stepped off a 6.5 foot drop before and I got pretty injured. So, this is something we take for granted until it doesn't function, and then it can really impact our safety too. We also know that with Parkinson's, we see a lot of impaired recognition of motion. So, for example, my friend with Parkinson's disease dementia sometimes will think something's moving that's not, like a leaf on a plant or, something that's lying on the floor. Often it's hard for people to read emotion and also facial expression. And this is something we hear a lot as far as communication and relationships with our Parkinson's community. We can see impairments in peripheral vision, and that a lot of times is the eyes being able to kind of, the oculomotor function, the movement of the eye, so we can really get that image peripherally and bring it in. And this can be impacted with on-off fluctuations. And so that means those medications that people take to help manage their Parkinson's, and some of you with Lewy might be on a carbidopa levodopa or Sinemet, a dopamine replacement medication to help with those symptoms. And when you have your fluctuations of on and off, that can impact your vision. So my friend with Parkinson's disease dementia, often things he says come in really close. He'll feel like all of a sudden the table that's 10 feet away is blocking him from standing up out of the chair when his medications go off. And it's important to note too that these changes a lot of times correlate with changes we see to how they walk. So those gait disturbances and also postural instability. So loss of balance, being able to write and posturally correct if you lose your balance. So vision so many things and impact so many things that we really take for granted and don't think about it almost as like a hidden disability or hidden impairment. So with this, with Parkinson's, right, we're thinking about movement of the eye. Well, a lot of people aren't aware. Look at these muscles around the eye, all those. And what they do is they surround the eye and they work collectively and they coordinate to move your eyes to the side, to move them together, to try to help with that focus of the image coming in so you can get that clearly. And as you can imagine, Parkinsonism, or these changes to movement, can really impact the coordination of these muscles. So that's where we can start to see some of those we call oculomotor changes or changes to the eye movement. This can impact visual tracking for somebody who's reading, things like scanning, also near point convergence. So if you're trying to look at a whiteboard, for example, or maybe you're looking up on the screen of this PowerPoint and you're trying to take some notes, coming back to your place can be more difficult. This can also result in double vision. So when the muscles aren't able to coordinate, you can get what's called convergence insufficiency, which we'll talk about in this next slide, and can cause some blurriness or double vision. And as I just mentioned in that previous slide, this can really be a risk for safety concerns, for falls, even for freezing of gait, which we'll talk about in a little bit. So convergence insufficiency, as I talked about, is when the eyes have a difficult time kind of moving toward each other, it makes it difficult for them to be able to bring the eyes to bring that image through the optic nerve and give you that clear single image. So that's where we'll get some of that double vision sometimes. If that's a problem, your eye care provider can add prisms to your reading lenses to help improve your near vision. Now, it's really important that you work with someone who understands your condition. You don't a lot of times want to wear those prism lenses when you're walking around. That can be dangerous. So having multiple pairs of glasses, making sure that you know when to use them, when not to use them is very, very important. And it's important too that if you have LBD, these eye movements, and this could be Parkinson's disease dementia or dementia with Lewy bodies, can really cause trouble if you're trying to use like a multifocal lens. So, like a progressive lens or a bifocal. So, if you're someone who's had progressives and all of a sudden now you've got Lewy and your vision is really having a problem, you're getting more blurriness, more double vision, it's time to talk to your eye care provider and see if maybe that is the right lens for you moving forward. And when you notice these symptoms, seek out, help as soon as you can. Because like I said, this can be related to safety, right? It could lead to falls. I think it's great if you can have a great neuro-ophthalmologist in your back pocket. But sometimes they're only at your larger academic eye institutes, but an ophthalmologist sometimes can also help with these issues as well, or an optometrist who's well trained in understanding these concerns. Once goes kind of unrecognized a lot of times is the impact of dry eye. So with those motor symptoms, a lot of times we blink less, so we don't think about that. Or you're incompletely blinking, the eye's not completely closing, or a little bit of both. And then that change in your blink rate can cause more dryness in the cornea, which can lead to some visual blurring or even some double vision. And especially important to note this time of year when we've got the heaters turned up more, depending on where you live. If it's colder and your home gets more dry, the air's more dry, this can be more of a problem sometimes seasonally as well. So how do we manage this? Well, there's a thing called artificial tears, right? I really encourage you to talk to your doctor, your eye care provider about these to make sure that you get the ones that are best for your eye condition and also safe as far as whether they have preservatives or not. Humidifiers can help a lot, you guys. Keeping that humidity level in your home at a good level and also staying hydrated. So I know it's something that we don't want to hear a lot, but drink that water. That's going to help your internal hydration and help you maintain a good tear film on the eye. Also, keeping the eyelids free of debris by doing some lid scrubs daily can help keep the oil glands free from dysfunction. And then ask your eye care provider if any of your medications are maybe increasing dryness. And maybe it's a medication that you and your doctor have been talking about. Do you really need that med or not? So I think always kind of having those conversations open of what could be the cause and what could you do about it. So we talked kind of about the issues around vision in the eye, right? So that dry eye, those movement problems. But what about vision in the brain? Well, 25% of our brain is dedicated to processing vision, and another 25% is dedicated to interacting with those visual regions of the brain. So we're talking about half your brain really is working to process visual information. So we have to try to recognize people, objects, and places. We're going to talk about some problems with that. We also use this to create memories, to perform tasks with our hands, a lot of times to find our way in our home or in our community, and also to avoid hazards. So, when we have any type of a brain condition like Lewy, where we're getting that pathology and some of those issues in different regions of the brain, that's where you start to see a little bit more of these symptoms pop up. I'm not going to give you a lecture on neuroanatomy of the eye here, but I just wanted you to take a look. I think this shows pretty nicely all the different parts of the brain, right? And what they're dedicated to. So you notice we've got your little eyeball down here on the bottom, and there's that optic nerve coming into the brain. And then we've got areas that are related to recognition and spatial attention, to color, to form, to depth perception, to motion, to control of your eye movements. So your brain really does a lot when it comes to vision, and we kind of think it ends at the eye, but we've got to consider both parts of the pie. So, how do you identify if you have visual brain dysfunction? Well, that's not going to be part of just like a routine eye exam that you get, annually. It requires some specialized testment and some assessments that are typically administered by a neurologist or a neuropsychologist during some cognitive testing. And it's important to note too that a lot of this can be screened as well by occupational therapists. So, if you're seeing OT, you can ask them to do some visual screening on some of these as well, like done a number of clock drawings. You'll see some of those in my slides today. But we can help provide some information and help educate you and educate the team on what's going on with your vision. So I think from this, you can really tell these become invisible symptoms. And this slide is courtesy of one of our amazing volunteers, Helen Metzger, who has had family with Lewy, and her family had a lot of history around being involved in optometry and eye conditions. And so they were very aware of these, and she speaks very clearly to this issue. So that depth perception, right? We see an image in 3D, but then they're often seeing it in 2D. It's really changing their perception of that image. That color contrast, right? You might see that, those red berries against that green tree, or that, your couch against the beige floor and carpet. But without that color contrast, a lot of times they're not going to see that and be able to perceive that the same way. That peripheral vision a lot of times gets a little hollowed out around if they're looking out of the corner of the eye, they're not going to get as clear an image and as sharp an image. And then that double vision that we talked about can really be a problem with the dry eye or with that convergence insufficiency. So things to keep an eye out for, of what we a lot of times don't understand. And maybe if you have LBD, you never really knew that's what you were experiencing, or maybe as a care partner, you weren't sure what was going on. But a lot of this stays hidden. And with that, really, really, really important that you talk to your eye providers about your diagnosis of LBD, and that it can impact the types of lenses that you can use. I talked earlier about those progressives, those bifocals, right? These lenses are going to require some really small eye movements that you might have to make slight, adjustments to your neck position. And a lot of times that can really be problematic. So if you have oculomotor slowing, you've got inaccurate adjustment of your eyes to focus, those multifocal lenses a lot of times will be difficult to use. So something to make sure that your eye provider knows, I might not be able to use these, and see if you can try something maybe before you actually buy it, or what can you do to see if that's actually going to work for you. And then I want to make sure we hit off on this before I really get into some of the visual brain dysfunction. You know, there's so many medical appointments I'm sure that you guys have to do, so many responsibilities. So you kind of think, oh, is my vision really that important? Yes. Make sure that you keep your eyes as healthy as possible. You're keeping those prescription lenses up to date and appropriate, and schedule your annual visits, with an ophthalmologist, even if you think your glasses and your prescription are okay, but you could have some changes inside your eye before you notice. So please keep up on your eye care. All right. So with that, I want to get into some of these cognitive changes around vision and talk about some of these, strategies and workarounds that we can do to really help you be successful at home. And it's important to note, these are going to be very unique to the individual. We had a saying in our clinic that no two snowflakes are alike, and neither are people with Parkinson's or LBD, and it's very true. Just because I talk about a problem here today doesn't mean you're going to experience it. And the way that I describe it, you might be experiencing something different, and that's totally normal. All right. So this is that article that I talked about that really looked at vision related cognitive deficits in DLB. So notice when we were looking at Parkinson's, right, we are looking more at kind of those eye movement issues, issues around dopamine and like that color discrimination. Now we're getting more into really what happens in the brain. So again, we've got that color discrimination and contrast sensitivity, also a problem for our folks with Lewy. Object and form recognition, and I'll show a picture in a minute of what this is. So like on my cluttered desk right now, am I able to find my, asthma inhaler from all the other things around it? Visuospatial impairments become really, really problematic, and I'm going to talk a lot more about that in a moment. So phenomenon called visual anagnosia. And this is where someone may be able to see all of the elements of an image, but they still can't recognize the image. And so I've got a little picture I'll show in a second that kind of demonstrates that. Pareidoia is where we're trying to really discern a scene or an image from that background noise. And then we also see issues with visual-constructual impairment. So this could be copying a figure. If you've ever done the mini mental test where you have to copy those little shapes in it, a lot of times that can really be hard. That could also be doing a puzzle or things where you have to kind of construct something. And then visual search impairment. So looking for the inhaler on the messy desk with all the issues can start to be a real problem. So you could see where, if I show you this next slide, the functional impact this could have too. So color discrimination, I've kind of given you an example of one of the tests there at the top left-hand corner. And you see how you're trying to see like some of these colors, this blue and green against kind of this other blue in the background and black. So you can see where maybe that starts to fade out a little bit, and then it's harder to pick up whatever image. And then think about that in daily life related to clothing color, or noticing if a cap goes on something because it's the same color. So this can be a problem. That object and form recognition, this next picture over more on the right hand side. So you notice here we've got kind of a desk, right? We've got a notebook there. There's some glasses. There's clearly a laptop, a phone, and some coffee. But sometimes that just all kind of runs together. So trying to pick out the object that they're looking for from that background can be problematic. And then that visual anagnosia would be you don't recognize, even if you're able to see all of the elements of that object, not knowing that's a phone sitting there or it's a pair of glasses. And then pareidoia is at the bottom. You notice the center picture, especially, there's an image that hopefully kind of sticks out to you of a little animal that'll come visit us soon in April. We see a little bunny rabbit there. And then on the one on the right-hand side, see if you can see the face that's in that one. So those are examples of some of the visual brain issues. Now, let's put that in daily life. Does this look familiar? So, if you're thinking about what we were just talking about, the issues with figure ground, right? Visual anagnosia, finding that object, scanning and looking for it. This is way too cluttered, right? There's minimal organization of items. Notice that the background of the cabinet, and a lot of medicine cabinets are like this, is mirrored. Well, that's causing a problem because now it almost looks like the toilet's inside the cabinet, right? And what you're picking up on too from the mirrored door is what's inside the shower. Are those things inside the cabinet? No. So this can really complicate things. So if you feel like go into your bathroom or something to get ready, he used to be able to shave and do all these things by himself, and now he doesn't know where to start. Sometimes it's not just the cognitive impairment. Sometimes it's trying to navigate something like this visually. So do you think this would cause some problems? I think so. And I will give it up. This person has a horrible obsession with skincare products. This is my bathroom cabinet. It is on our list of things to do to organize it. Because I'll be honest, the other day I was like, can't find my eye drops. My daughter's like, they're right here. So, this can be really problematic to go and try to do a task like, wash your face or get ready for bed or brush your teeth. when this is what you're facing. All right, so let's talk a little bit more about visuospatial function. And so when you define this, these are abilities that provide a spatial map of our environment. So it's going to tell you where things are around you in space, and it also involves sense of direction. So this could be wayfinding in your home, getting from the recliner to the bathroom. Could also be knowing what street to turn on when you're coming home. So this is an area that we see a lot of issues, right? Some of the things that you might see pop up most often, setting items too close to the edge of a table or a surface. I had a gentleman one time that was actually, he was in just like mid stages of Parkinson's, and he had had to stop working. He had a lot of dyskinesia, a lot of physical issues, and he just wanted to unload the dishwasher to help his family out. That's the one thing. And he kept breaking dishes. And his wife was like, "Look, I'm glad you want to help out, but you're breaking all our dishes." So all we did was put a colored placemat on the counter where his dishwasher was. So when he took them out of the dishwasher, he put them on that mat. Then we also put some liner in his shelves where he could see where he was putting that glass in the cabinet. So he needed more, his brain needed more information to know where the edge of that surface was, right? I mentioned earlier my friend that perceives items closer than they are a lot of times. This can happen sometimes. Let's say your loved one or you're sitting at the couch, right? And you want to get up to go to the bathroom, and now you feel like the coffee table is like right on top of you or in your lap, and you didn't feel like that maybe before. You'll sometimes see people kind of bump into furniture, into walls. Another one is trouble estimating distance to a chair when approaching to sit. So you're walking up to the chair and you'll see the arm go out. If someone has freezing of gait, a lot of times you'll start to see the stutter steps because their brain is having a hard time figuring out how far that chair is, how far that target is, right? I mentioned difficulty judging distance. We hear this a lot of times with driving. And I have a dear friend and former client who she wasn't driving, but her visual, her ability to judge distances was so impaired that she would get so anxious when her husband would drive that she would be in hysterics because she thought they were going to hit the car in front of them or next to them because she could not judge how far they were away. She started wearing an eye mask. Um, and then challenges to navigating the home and the community. You know, think about within your home. There may be places that furniture's kind of crowded in, or maybe something's in the path a little bit, or you know, there's lighting challenges, but there's a lot of things that we can do to really make an environment more hospitable. Wanted to give you one way we test this a lot of times in the clinic is clock drawings. These were actual clock drawings of some of my patients over the years because I really found them very, very, very fascinating. You notice that these changes to visuospatial function, important to note, are independent of visual acuity. So you could have near perfect vision and still have this visual brain dysfunction, right? So we're not talking about the eye necessarily, we're talking about that processing of it. Important to note in Parkinson's, it suggests it's impacted by fatigue. So if you have a lot of fatigue during the day, the chance that when you're more fatigued, that's making these changes worse is probably pretty likely. And as I mentioned earlier, this correlates with these changes to movement. So motor planning, for example, a good example of motor planning is like scooting forward and leaning forward to stand up from your chair, right? With motor planning, we start to see a lot of problems with that with vision. Freezing of gait. So when you feel like you start to try to take a step and your feet are stuck, this can be really related to visuospatial issues. I had a lovely woman one time that when we get to lighting, this will make a lot more sense. She was finding she had freezing of gait on one side of her bed and was falling frequently there too. She'd go to get into bed and she'd freeze and then she'd have these falls. And it just hit me one day. I asked all the questions about space around the bed and all of those things. She didn't have, her bed wasn't tighter on that side to the wall, but her lamp, a table lamp was her main lighting in the room, and it was on the opposite side of the bed than the one she got into. So her side of the bed was dark. So her brain, she got to that side and the freezing started. So once she put a light on that side of the bed, she put a bedside lamp on her side too. It reduced that. If anyone ever tells you that can cure freezing a gate or make it go away, don't believe them. It's not true. We have not found that yet, but you can do strategies like this to help manage it and help reduce it. All right. So, what do we do about this? What are some strategies, right? Well, number one is bringing more contrast into your environment, really thinking about what that could look like. And I'll show some visual examples in a second. But often our walls are kind of beige or white, our floors are hardwood, or our carpet's kind of neutral, our furniture's kind of neutral, and it all just kind of blends together. So thinking about, having a little bit more color, a little bit more contrast to give the brain that information. Also, give some visual targets wherever you can. If you've got a spot where you sit and drink your coffee, put a brightly colored coaster in that spot. This is a little bit busy, but I've got one here that's floral, something that's red or like a bright color, something that really contrasts from the surface that it's on will give you an idea of, okay, that's where I need to put my glass or set my cup of coffee. Also, glasses and dishware with color can be really helpful. I don't have a glass with me, but if you think about a clear glass, it's like a bubble, right? You can see the room through it, you can see the liquid through it. That can be really confusing. But if you use something that's got some color, to it, a coffee mug or something with more color, there's a lot of clear, glasses or colored glassware you can get, or like the melamine glasses, acrylic glassware, things like that, that can give the brain more information. You don't have to always go buy new things too. You can just use some colored tape, duct tape, painter's tape, depending on what you're putting it on, to give your self a little bit more sense of like where a corner is, maybe on a table, or putting that on your phone and where you set it on the charger, but giving your brain more information. Make sure you've got adequate lighting in your home. That's something we're going to talk about in a minute, what that can be. And then also, so important to minimize clutter. The more clutter is in an area, and that could be big, like your living room having clutter all over it, or your dining room table or your desk, your brain then has to try to process where all of those things are. And all of it becomes clutter for your brain to try to work through. All right. So let's talk about attention. And like I said, in a little bit, I'm going to get into some pictures and kind of demonstrate some of these things a little bit more. So we're talking about attention, right? This allows us, it has the wrong quote here. I apologize for that. That's the visuospatial one. So we're talking about attention. It's your ability to attend and stay focused, right? On something as you kind of ignore other stimuli around you. So here, maybe you're trying to pour that cup of coffee and tea and really pay attention to it without getting distracted by, the dog running by or the television being on. So that visual attention can be very important as well. There's a lot of challenges to attention in our world. Sights and sounds in the environment, decreased contrast sensitivity. Like I said, trying to do two things at once, if we're multitasking, that can cause a problem. We have a slower processing speed with Parkinson's and with Lewy, so that bradyphrenia. So that's going to really, you have to attend a little bit longer, maybe, than you would think so. The slower movements or that bradykinesia can also impact attention a lot of times, and trying to really find and locate and move toward what it is that you're attending to. Important to note hearing too, that can be part of what we attend to as well. And I think it's important to note, take care of your hearing screenings and look into your hearing also. That's very important with dementia as we get older. Impaired visual scanning. We talked about how that oculomotor issue makes it harder for people to scan. Well, that's going to make it harder to pay attention to something if you can't scan and find it. The cognitive fluctuation, so kind of those ups and downs that you guys can sometimes have to your cognitive abilities, that can impact attention. And then also those cluttered environments, the more things that we have to distract will cause a problem. So your main strategies for this, reduce the distractions as much as you can. If you're trying to have, dinner at your dining table, clear off all the clutter, right? Organize that space. Don't have the television or the radio on in the background, or a lot of the computer may be up with something on it. Try to really limit the focus. Avoid multitasking so that you can attend better to that task. But remember to take breaks. Tension is something that sometimes we push a little too long, honestly. You guys might not be having an easy time paying attention to this after a while because these get a little bit long here. Your brain may need a break, and that's okay. If you've been on the computer working on your taxes for a long time or trying to attend to cooking a meal, give yourself a little brain break. Let your attention kind of wander for a bit and then bring it back. Once again, increase the contrast. Your brain knows what it's supposed to attend to. Optimize the lighting, which we'll talk about, and then use those visual targets. Give your brain more information about where you're going to put an item. All right, so let's get into these strategies, right? How do we adapt for success? Well, the number one thing I want to say is not all strategies are going to work for everyone. There is no cookbook for this kind of stuff. That's where working with an occupational therapist, physical therapist is really important because you are unique and your needs are unique. And also remember, Louis is a moving target. A strategy that works for a while may not work all the time. It might work today, it might not work tomorrow. It might work for 2 weeks, it might not work next month. So, it is progressive. Your visual needs may change over time. So you're trying to hit a moving target. So try to look at it as being creative and flexible. I know it can be very frustrating because you feel like you find something that works and then it's like it ran away. And then really assess your vision, consistently check in on the need to adapt and come up with other strategies too to make sure you're staying safe. So when we're talking about contrast, here's some examples, right? You want to think about this within figure ground, right? So if I'm putting together like a bin for toiletry items, I want to make sure that there's going to be good contrast, right? And that figure ground, they can see the figure from the background. This is important with your printed documents, right? So not having a lot of busyness or, a colored font on colored ink that's not contrasting. We always made a lot of reminder signs for our clients at my clinic, to stand with their feet wider apart or different things like that. You've got to make sure there's good contrast. And we even want to think about this with furniture in our home and like placemats on our table or how we're setting up, dishes when we eat. So thinking about, colors that really you can see from that background color. And so I gave you an example here, on the left-hand side, a lot of neutrals, I think like we see in a lot of home design now. You notice that they have put in some things with like some black on it that gives a little bit of contrast, lets your brain see a little bit more. Notice that picture on the right. We put that blue chair, there's a pop. Now you can see that, right? And so if you have a favorite color or something, if you've been looking at replacing a chair or recliner, maybe not going with just the traditional, neutral color, maybe getting something a little bit bold. Or you notice they've done a lot there with pillows and throws. You can kind of do that too to add a little bit more color. So then if someone's having that issue of kind of having trouble finding the chair when they're approaching to sit, a lot easier to see that blue chair than it is to see something that kind of blends into the background. We're talking about lighting. You want to think about lighting that is between dim and bright. That's usually what's best for people with visual brain dysfunction. Now, overhead lighting from can lights can be a problem because it creates a glare that can be really difficult to see. So if you have lights like that in your house, you just get a dimmer switch, you can more adjust the level of the light. In fact, I think dimmers are one of the best things you can do because you can really adjust the brightness to what you need because that's also going to change as the lighting outside your home changes, right? If based on the sunlight that's coming in. And then experiment with, what works better. Bring a lamp into a spot of the room, open or close the curtains at a time of day, adjust the brightness of overhead lighting. You have to really kind of see what works and what is best for you. Some things here to avoid: glass top tables. If I've had one client fall into a glass top table, I've had 20. So coffee tables are the worst, but glass top tables are a problem, period, because you see how you can just see straight through it. So a lot of times their brain doesn't recognize it's there. The photo on the right, you can see also the other problem where you get a lot of glare right off of it and a lot of almost mirroring too coming in. So if someone was sitting at that table and trying to eat dinner, they might be confused at all these images and shapes and things coming through. So something to watch. And if you have a glass top table and you're like, I can't afford to go buy a new table, thanks a lot for this. Get a tablecloth. You know what I mean? Maybe use a placemat, use a runner. Like there are a lot of things that you can do. I don't have a glass top table anymore, but I do have like a tray on my coffee table that has items in it too. So you don't necessarily have to go buy new furniture, but you can get creative there. We talked about that visual search, that visual scanning, that anagnosia. This is a real problem, right? So try to only have essential items for everyday use and view. So on the counter, on the dresser, in the bathroom, separate items in an organized, task-centric way. And I've got an example of this in a second. Add some brightly colored tape to items that are used every day. A big one, I think, is the cell phone. You could get a different cover. You can't really see mine with the blurring, but I've got a floral cover on mine. Before that, my phone was black. I couldn't see it anywhere. It just, the minute it went on a table, it's gone. Um, Dimensional fabric paint. So that kind of puffy paint, you can put somebody's name on it. You can write phone on it. You could put stickers. I mean, you can do really anything that helps your brain see where that thing is. And then another thing I think is very helpful is to have an anchor point in every room. That's where I put my glasses. And if I ever don't put my glasses in the anchor point, guess who's going to be asking their husband to find their glasses? So this is that place, that anchor point in your room, something visible. It could be a candy dish that you got from your aunt that's, red or, whatever. And that's where you put your keys. That's where you set your phone. That's where you put your glasses. So you don't, anything that you need to find only goes in that spot in that room. And so this can be very helpful too. Also, though, think about how can you organize and simplify, right? I've given some ideas here. One is a bin. You'll notice there it's got some grooming items in it, right? Because my dear friend with Parkinson's disease dementia was having trouble with shaving. He's like, you just can't figure out how to shave anymore. Just this one bin and like everything was in it. It kind of looked like my cabinet actually. And I was like, he needs a shaving bin. And so you notice there at the bottom, they have one of these that sits even on the sink top if you want, that you can put your shaving essentials in. Sometimes if you keep things in drawers, maybe just having baskets in the drawer that kind of separate and help you organize the items, that can help as well. So a lot of ways that you can approach this. There's no right or wrong. We're looking at home navigation, right? Keep your home well lit to minimize shadows. I know that a lot of times I'm horrible about this because I like really kind of ambient lighting in my home. When my friend with PDD comes over, we got to crank up the lights, right? In the hallways and everywhere. I usually don't have light going. Use that contrast wherever possible. Place a sign with an arrow pointing to the room that they need to find, or place a sign on the door of the bathroom at gaze level. A lot of times, a picture of what's inside the room, if it's on the door, can help, like a picture of the toilet on the door to the bathroom. Consider creative ways to highlight certain rooms. I know I had a dear client that they were having trouble finding the bathroom. Right, they had moved to a different place, and all of a sudden he could not figure out what the bathroom was. Painted the door frame a different color and put that picture of the toilet on the front, and he knew how to find the bathroom then. You can also create some unique pathways, using some carpet tape. Make sure you don't create a tripping hazard or something, but there's a lot of ways to kind of define a path more. And then I think this is really, really important is using that contrasting tape to mark the edge of stairs or steps. That can be super, super helpful. So some examples here I've given you. That up at the top that's similar to what I've done in hallways. In the top left, the green and yellow tape, where and have the tape starting at where the recliner was, say for example, and then you take that all the way to the bathroom. Sometimes we've called it the yellow brick road if it was like bright yellow. Whatever works. I find humor does a lot. People remember things if it's kind of funny or entertaining. You'll notice the red door frame there in the second. That was similar to what we did with the bathroom door. The taped X's on the floor are for those approach to sit problems where people are having trouble finding the chair. It shows them where to put their feet. The turtle on the walker, I had a woman who needed to remember to slow down. So that was actually a cue for her to kind of take her bigger steps and slow down, be a little bit more like the turtle. And then on the bottom right hand of your screen, you see that yellow, that bright yellow color on the edge of a stair. Super, super important for safety. When we're getting dressed, think about organizing your closets into sections. So you're going to separate your shirts from tops, your pants maybe from accessories. But another thing I think happens and helps a lot more is kind of putting everything on one hanger. So I used to have people use Ziploc bags or even those like mesh laundry bags, and you could put an outfit on the hanger, right? You can put underwear, socks, bra, whatever you need to inside the little lingerie bag or inside the plastic bag. But if there's something, they just go and get their hanger out, and then they've got all their items to get dressed. Think about doing something similar in your drawers, like for a dresser that you're doing with closets. I found that placing a photograph a lot of times on the outside of the drawer, like my friend, they have this huge, almost like a bureau of drawers, and they all just look the same. It's like having 25 drawers that all look alike. So at first I put like a picture, like you do a lot of times, of a sock, like on the sock drawer. Guess what? The paranoia and some of the issues with vision, he didn't recognize that as a sock and think of that as a sock, so he didn't go to it. I took a picture of the inside of the sock drawer and put it on the outside. Bingo, we found it. You can use that similar labeling in your kitchen, anywhere that you find they're having frustration finding things that are maybe behind closed doors or in drawers. And then another one, I think, simplify, simplify, simplify. If you got a lot of clothes that you haven't worn, or if you can take seasonal items out and just have the clothing for one season, that simplifies and helps a lot. Talking about reading, because we're coming to the end here, large print with a strong contrast can help. You notice I've tried to do that with these slides as much as I can. If you're reading sitting at a table or a desk, clear items away from the surface. That's all distraction. Your brain has to try to process it too. Glossy pages are the enemy. So magazines, anything that has like a gloss to the material, it's going to glare, especially if it's uplit. It makes it a lot harder to read. You can use a ruler, a bookmark, or a line magnifier to help you move and kind of track from line to line. I'll show a picture of one of those in a second. A lot of times, the front page of a newspaper or pages that have a lot of different sections and paragraphs and photos can be difficult. So I know for a lot of my clients with Louis, they would have an online subscription to their newspaper, which most people do now, and they could print out a certain article. So it would be, printer friendly and reader friendly. So you can download that. Consider audiobooks though, especially even as like a respite for the brain. I've had some people that they'll read a chapter and then they'll listen to a chapter. And so they get a little break if reading is becoming more difficult. And one of my favorite hacks is a book light. I think probably every person I've ever worked with Parkinson's is out there running around with a book light. I have a book light. It directs that light right over what you're trying to read. Helps so much. This is just one example here in the photo. There's a lot of different book lights you can get. You can also get magnifiers or lights that are more on stands, like that picture on the right-hand side to kind of go over the entire page. That picture in the center is a line magnifier. And I usually like the ones that had a highlighted bar or a red bar because that helped people kind of see where they were on that line. I use a line magnifier, I'll be honest, for recipes a lot. I find it really helpful. I don't like a line magnifier as much when I'm reading like a book. I'm more like a book light or a page magnifier. When you're thinking electronic devices, you want to try to adjust the contrast for text and images. You can try various levels, but for most people, you need the contrast at 100% to really be able to see it well. The brightness of text can also be adjusted, and that desired brightness is going to depend upon the color and the contrast of your background. And the best way to find out what's right is to experiment. So you could go to your service provider, like the Apple Store. There are people out there that specialize in assistive technology. A lot of occupational therapists do. So you can work with them. Sometimes our youngins among us, our grandkids, and maybe kids in college really know how to use their devices well. So it gives them something to help us with too. So play around with that and don't give up on the computer and the phone just because your vision is a problem. All right, so really quickly, I want to get into these hallucinations and misperceptions. So, when we're thinking about a hallucination, these are typically visual, and they can be of person or animals, but they're perceiving the object when it's not there. These can often be confused with illusions, which is a misperception of an object or event that's real. So, like a coat hanging over coat rack that looks like a person standing there. I had this cute little baby in the picture because the first person I ever treated with Louis, his hallucination was babies. And I always thought if I was going to have a hallucination, I think that would maybe be the one. And he said they were usually sleeping babies, they weren't like crying babies. So, um, the simple hallucinations are to be aware of this sense of presence, of feeling something or someone pass over your shoulder, or feeling the presence of a deceased relative or pet. That can be something that people perceive. Some people might see things in their periphery, like shapes of people or shadows, or we talked about those illusions. So it's important to note that difference between a full formed visual hallucination and a more simple hallucination. I thought this was interesting in this visual article. I said that people with DLB and PDD who showed complex visual hallucinations, right? That correlated with cognitive impairments in multiple domains, so like attention, executive function, visuospatial, like that graph we showed earlier. These minor hallucinations, though, the illusions, the passage, and the presence hallucinations were not really correlated with cognitive impairment. So, something to keep in mind. Um, you really want to try to mitigate these as best you can. So avoid spending long periods of time in dim lighting or dark rooms. Sleep hygiene becomes critical. So trying to keep that consistent day night schedule to prevent sleep deprivation. And then poor vision can also lead to visual hallucinations. So you want to make sure you're having those eye conditions treated properly, right? And the appropriate prescription lenses, like we talked about earlier. If that hallucination's frightening, reassure the person that they're safe. Consider maybe moving to another environment. But then you can also try to change the environment by increasing the lighting, the visual and auditory stimulation. You can maybe turn on a movie or some music that the person enjoys. And then there's always activities, right, that maybe they like to do. Always stay calm and avoid arguing. Reassure the person that they're safe. Promote engagement in something they like, maybe cutting out cookies or decorating something or doing a craft. Try to keep a consistent daily schedule. That can really help with that fatigue element. Support participation in regular exercise. We have a great course on the Lewy Learning Center of exercise videos you can follow along with, and sleep. And then moderate excess and stimuli in the environment. So, like if there's a lot of noise in the environment or a lot of people. Who remembers all the things that people used to see on toast? I'll try to make this quick, but when we're supporting altered perceptions, when I found this picture, I was like, I remember when people were always seeing different things on toast. You want to rule out any contributing physical ailments. So, a UTI, a urinary tract infection, can be number one. If somebody all of a sudden is having hallucinations and psychosis, you want to rule out probably that urinary tract infection. It's important to note you may not need medical intervention just because someone is having a hallucination. If it's not frightening, if it's not concerning, if it's not causing any problem, like my gentleman that saw babies, there's not a reason really to medicate it. In fact, you want to try to review any medications that might need to be reduced or stopped. Some of those dopaminergic medications can cause some hallucinations if the dosing is not right. Look at those environmental and social factors. You want to try to use those non-pharmacological approaches like we just did in that last slide first. Antidepressants, a lot of times your doctor may look at, and that might seem a little weird, but go with them and listen. We want to try to not use those antipsychotics if we don't have to, right? There can be a lot of significant reactions. Things like haloperidol can block dopamine. So we want to monitor closely for any reactions if someone does start an antipsychotic medication. All right, I made it to the summary. So I think from all of this, you can tell LBD can impact vision in a number of ways. So important to openly discuss these changes to vision with your supports. Expand your healthcare team to include PT, OT if you need, a neuro-ophthalmologist. Prioritize your visual health, stay current on your eye exams, and then be flexible and innovative. Try a lot of strategies, find what works for you, but don't give up. Vision is part of our life, and there's ways to hopefully make it work for you. We put some resources in the slides. You guys, we have a great webinar from 2023 that you can watch that's also available on our Lewy Learning Center. If you want to get a little bit deeper, there's a neuro-ophthalmologist on there and an optometrist. And we've got some great great PDF there called Visual Function and LBD that goes through a lot of these strategies that I just talked about. All right, you guys, with that, I'll stop sharing. We'll do some questions. Sorry, I went over. Oh, you guys are too kind. Thank you. I want to send you all a heart and a and an applause. They're a fantastic audience. Thanks for your patience.
Thanks so much, Julia. All right, that was a really great presentation, extremely rich. So I do want to remind everybody that the slides and the recording will be sent out in about 1 week. So you will have a chance to download them and review them. So that's terrific. In the meantime, though, we do have some really great questions, and we're going to go ahead and jump into the Q&A now with Julia while we've got her. I think we'll have time for about 5 to 10 minutes worth of Q&A, and then we'll have to probably drop off and let people go. So Julia, we have a really interesting mix of questions here. So we'll be stretching your brain just a little bit. A lot of these are practical, and so I'm going to take them in kind of no particular order. All right, we have a question here about a person who has migraines and is already being seen by their neuro-ophthalmologist for migraines, but now they're experiencing some new symptoms, some new visual issues. And I know we can't discuss sort of individual cases, but so I'll phrase this in a more broad way. Can you give us some tips and tricks for how to speak to your ophthalmologist or your neuro-ophthalmologist about LBD?
Absolutely. I think that, a neuro-ophthalmologist should be pretty familiar with LBD, I would hope. But I think, letting them know the specific issues that you're having. For example, we had someone who called up and wanted to see a neuro-ophthalmologist, and they said, well, we want to see him because we have Lewy or have LBD. And the scheduling people were like, well, they don't see LBD. Well, the thing is, he sees you for convergence insufficiency, right? Or for double vision or for whatever. So I think really kind of, sticking to the problems that you're having, communicating those with your neuro-ophthalmologist, and you can describe things as best you can describe them, and then just letting them know, that you've noticed some changes as far as maybe your use of lenses, different progressive lenses or things like that. But I think as much as you can stick to the issue of what the visual complaint is, really helps them troubleshoot more.
Great, thank you. And this is a question that I think is probably not related to vision, but maybe something that kind of masquerades as something that might. So here's an individual who apparently were having a discussion with their sister one-on-one, and kind of in the middle of the conversation, she just sort of stopped and said, "Who are you? I don't recognize you." So when someone doesn't recognize a loved one kind of out of the blue, is that more commonly vision or more commonly something else that might be associated with LBD?
Yeah, there is that visual misperception piece, and we talked about identification of faces can be a problem, but then there also are some delusions that this could fall into. So Capgras delusion or the imposter syndrome is one of the more common. So a lot of times with this, the person may even start to think that you're an imposter, that what have you done with my sister? Who are you? You're not my sister. And so that it's important to note is more of a delusion. So that goes into more of a psychiatric component. We do think that there's really some visual interplay a lot of times, with some of these, like they have the misperception, but then it kind of triggers into the delusion a little bit. So I think that, we've got a great Lewy brief on our tip jar that you can go to in the Lewy Learning Center that talks about Capgras delusion or Capgras delusion, depending on who you're talking to, and how to really kind of stay calm. Sometimes things that I found, if there's something special between you as sisters, that you can relate to or bring up, up, it seems like a lot of times that will connect that person back in. I had a couple I worked with that music really helped them. That he would turn on a playlist of songs that they had, kind of listened to in their life, or concerts they'd gone to, or things like that. And then she could more kind of see him for who he was. So I would, keep an eye on that. Maybe talk if you have a psychiatrist too, or talk to your movement disorder specialist about, are they possibly starting to have some delusions? Because those can start to sometimes cause some more agitation issues too.
Yeah, thank you, Julia. And it just goes to speak, I think, to how complex, this disease is that, you can have symptoms that may be caused by, vision, maybe caused by movement, maybe caused by delusions, etc.
For
Um,
sure.
all right, so here's a question. Can you tell any tips or tricks for the refrigerator? The refrigerator can become extremely cluttered and busy and difficult. So anything you can share with us on that?
I think it's a great question. We've been working on this too in my house. And so we have refrigerator bins that we've been using. And something I will say that you'll have to watch, a lot of bins for refrigerators are clear plastic. And I could see where that could become a problem, right? What we found more successful, my daughter has a lot of issues with visuospatial processing, is we have some bins that they're kind of like mesh, like you can see they're plastic, but you pull the bin out then and you can see what's in it. You can find these really cheap at, like Target, Home Goods, any kind of places like that that you go to. But I think, having some bins that you start to sort things in, so then at least you can go to that area where, maybe all your dairy products are together, or your, salad dressings are in a bin. And that can help a lot. So I think play around. There's a lot of organization stuff out there now, which is kind of fun.
Yeah, great. And then we had a question also about colors, and this person mentioned that they have heard that blues and greens can be problematic. And do you have any suggestions for color combinations that would give high contrast?
What's really interesting is, kind of black and white is your main contrast you think of. There is something, well, I don't really fully understand this, but neon green, for whatever reason, a lot of times people with visual brain dysfunction see that color. It really pops out and kind of for whatever reason grabs their attention more. So I know we had a roll of like bright neon green duct tape in our clinic, and that's what we put kind of on everything all over the place. So that's one to look at. I think that it's really looking at contrast is dependent on your lighting too. So like for example, let's say you have hardwood floors that are dark, and the black, usually treads on stairs are black. Well, that's not really going to give good contrast, so then you're going to have to go with more of like maybe a white or bright yellow or things like that. So yeah, I think that it's looking at what you feel like is going to almost scream the loudest at the brain. You have to kind of check with the person that you're doing the intervention for as well, and see if that also works for their brain too.
Great, thank you. Maybe two more questions here. Do you have any recommendations on arranging clothing in closets and drawers?
Yeah, I think I went through that a little bit. I would say think of arranging it as much as you can by task. So what I found was most successful for people was when you had a whole outfit on a hanger. So, we tend to wear kind of the same things with the same things. So people would put the whole outfit on the hanger, like I said, a Ziploc bag or like a garment bag, like looped over it with underwear, socks, whatever. You can even put jewelry and accessories in there if you want to. But so everyone, they have everything they need. Conversely, with drawers and things, I think keep them as mono as possible. So like a sock drawer, an underwear drawer, a bra drawer, a t-shirt drawer. If you can do that. Smaller drawers too, a lot of times are better, and more shallow drawers. The deeper something gets where you have to dig for it, or there's lots of things in it, that can cause problems. But there are drawer organizers too, right? That you can get and put in drawers that you could have your, underwear, and then maybe your socks are in one. So I think look at as task oriented and kind of condensed and simplified as possible.
Great. And I think we're going to finish on one question that I only have one person ask here, but I think a lot of people probably have this question. Do you have any recommendations regarding smartphones? We're all using smartphones these days. This person mentioned that their husband had an iPhone, but that wasn't working very well because they have so many options. Any recommendations you can make about smartphone use?
Absolutely. The more simple, the better. There are some, platforms that you can get. One is a Jitterbug phone. I'm not sure. I think they still sell those. But what Jitterbug did, and you can get some simplified phone platforms this way, is it really simplifies what you can access on the phone. And so, and the fonts are bigger. One thing is the main thing you can do is go in your settings, adjust the brightness, adjust the contrast, adjust the font size so it's larger, so everything's bigger. But then also too, let me see. I know it's hard to see on my screen probably because I have the blur on, but you don't really want your person's phone to look like that. Right? You might just have contacts and that's it. And that's the only thing that they can push to. So you have to really look at when we used to work with phones with people is we'd look at what they use the phone for, and then how could I set it up to do those tasks and really nothing else. The problem, a lot of times I find with phones too, is if we have our, I kind of gave this tip of having like the teenage, grandson come set it up. But the problem is they're going to set it up like they set it up to do like everything. And they've got their games or this and that. So let them know that like granddad only wants to, or mom, or whoever only wants to use or be able to find the contacts so they can call people. So think of how can you simplify it, adjust the contrast, the brightness, the font, and get everything off the home screen that you can as much as possible. I think that's the simplest way to go.
Yeah, that's really great advice. Thank you. It almost sounds like going back to like an earlier version of Android, where you only had four.
Yes.
So maybe that's
Yep.
an op. Yeah, and the
Yeah.
background certainly can be an issue. So thank you very much, Julia. Everybody who attended, I hope you all enjoyed today's discussion. Unfortunately, we are out of time. On behalf of the LBDA, I would like to thank you all for taking time out of your day to join us, and also thank Julia Wood for sharing her wisdom with us. As a reminder, we are going to send you a follow-up email in about 1 week, and that will have the link to the recording of the presentation, as well as all of the resources and links that were mentioned during today's webinar. We invite you to visit our landing page on our website to stay informed about upcoming webinars and access past recordings as well. And Rose is going to drop that link into the chat so you can go directly to the webinar landing page. Our next webinar will be in approximately 1 month. It's going to happen on Thursday, March 20th at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. And we will be joined by Dr. James Galvin, who will be presenting a 1-hour overview on the topic of clinical trial results, what we learned from recent phase 2 trials in DLB. Dr. Galvin is Division Chief for Cognitive Neurology at the University of Miami in Boca Raton, Florida. He is the founding director of the Comprehensive Center for Brain Health, director and principal investigator of the Lewy Body Dementia Research Center of Excellence, and a principal investigator for the Native Alzheimer's Disease Resource Center in Minority Aging Research. This is going to be a really excellent presentation, and you can register now if you would like. Rose is going to drop that link in the chat as well. Finally, we are going to have a survey pop up at the end here. We do ask that you take a moment to complete that because it does help us inform our content and make this series better for you. With that, we look forward to seeing you in March. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.